In this video, I really want to talk about simplifying your approach to locating bass and also talk a little bit about why it's important not to change your baits too soon when finding bass. Because if you do it too soon, it can really lead you down a wrong path. And I'm gonna let you guys know that I'm probably going to end up rambling a little bit in this video. I tried to think about it a little bit beforehand, and I don't really try to structure these videos. I try to make them very conversation, but I'm gonna end up rambling. And so I am sorry, but I do believe by the end of this video, you will be a better angler and you will be a more simplified angler when it comes to fishing. Now, before we get into it, this video is brought to you by my apparel company, Finn Fishing. And guess what? Black Friday sales are on the website right now. They are live. Everything on the website, except for the rod socks, are 20% off. So whether that is tri-blend t-shirts, sun shirts, hats, gloves, the all new duck shorts, it's something that I'm super proud of and you guys have already heard a lot about. Everything is on sale. I am starting the Black Friday sales now because it seems like everybody else is, so why not? Anyways, I'm gonna leave a link down below in the description. Thank you to all of you who have shopped at Finn Fishing. All right, let's talk about locating fish and not changing out your baits too soon, not changing your lures too soon. Now, when it comes to finding bass, I believe that one of the biggest things that really gets in the way of anglers actually locating fish is them just kind of spending too much time in the bottom of their boat or on land trying to find that perfect lure, trying to find the perfect color, and just trying to find what they think is going to catch bass. And so I know that that may sound a little bit weird, but I truly believe that if you look at the best anglers in the world, what they do better than anyone else is they are simply more efficient with their time on the water. And they are not afraid to skip over a couple of random fish in order to find a cluster of fish, in order to find schools of fish, stretches of fish, whatever it may be. And I think that all of us as anglers, when we get to the body of water, one of the best things that we can do is try to find an area that has a lot of life and have a lot of fish in it. Because when you find those type of areas, it really doesn't matter a lot of times what you are throwing lure-wise. You will start catching fish. And I have seen this all over the place, all over the country. And I've also been reminded about this constantly all the time by fishing a lot of bigger tournaments where I have a co-angler in my boat, because I have fished on bodies of water that you pre-fish for 3 or 4 days, you get into the tournament, you really think that you have something dialed in, and as soon as you take an angler to an area that you have found that has fish, for example, a co-angler, and you think, man, I'm gonna catch a bunch in here, he starts catching them as good sometimes on something completely different. And it's not, the biggest reason is that it's not that he necessarily has something figured out, it's just that you have brought him to a place that has a lot of fish. And that is the most important thing that I think every angler should strive to look for when they're out there on the water, is zones and areas that have a lot of fish. Now, with that being said, when I go fishing, I really have, and I'm trying to locate fish, I have 4 lures, 4 categories of lures that I'm going to have on the front deck of my boat. Now, I may have more than 4 rods on the front deck of my boat, but if I really wanted to simplify things, I could do this with 4 different rods. And I've talked about this a little bit before in the past, and I think that it just holds true no matter where you go. But I think that you should have something fast as far as a lure goes. And what I mean by fast is this is gonna be your main search tool. This is really any type of lure that you primarily bring horizontally through the water column. So spinner baits, chatter baits, top waters, jerk baits, anything that moves quickly and you bring horizontally through the water column, that is one of your #1 search tools. Now, the next bait that I'm going to throw is something slow. And this is something that you primarily drag across the bottom, or that you can use to flip and kind of pitch into cover. Baits like Texas rigs and jigs are gonna be at the top of my list when it comes to something slow. Now, the next thing that I think that you should have is something finesse. And this can actually be baits that come horizontally through the water column and baits that you kind of drag slowly on the bottom that are more vertical style lures. So you can have baits that are slower like Ned rigs and drop shots and Nico rigs. You can also have baits that are finesse that are like finesse swim baits. They come horizontally through the water column. Spy baits, jig head minnows. These are all baits that fall in the finesse category. Now, the last lure selection that you should really have on the front deck of your boat, no matter where you go, and this is something that I've felt like I've really developed over the last 5 years, is a big bait. A really big bait. Glide baits to me are the best. This is a soft Berkeley glide bait. This is a Clash 9. These are big baits that no matter where you go, I think that these are really important to have, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here soon. Now, when it comes to picking out what lure that you're going to use in each of those categories, it really just depends on the time of the year and the lake that you are fishing. And I think that a lot of anglers, if you just kind of give them the time of the year and the type of lake, or maybe even the cover that is in that lake, they're going to be able to pick this thing out fairly fast. I mean, if you tell me, Tyler, you're going to fish a natural lake in the pre-spawn, when it comes to a lure that is fast, I'm already thinking of a jerk bait. You know, a jerk bait to me is a bait that I fish really fast. Most natural lakes have a mixture of grass and rock in them, and most natural lakes have clearer water in them. And a jerk bait is a great bait in that situation. I mean, if you talk about something slow, a Texas rig comes to my mind. A Texas rig is a bait that comes through grass really, really well, which you see a lot on natural lakes. And so that's going to be the first bait, probably something that is green pumpkin in color. And we're going to talk about colors a little bit more here in just a minute. And then you think about something finesse. To me, a drop shot. I always have a drop shot tied on. 100% of the year I have a drop shot tied on. It is my main go-to finesse bait. And then again, a glide bait of some sort or a bigger bait. And I don't even care what color the glide bait is. And again, we're going to talk about why in just a minute. Now, when it comes to colors of the baits that you are picking, I always suggest just do a really quick Google search. Like if you're on a lake, you can pretty much find what the main bait fish are in lakes. And there's also some things that as an angler you should just know. Like if you are fishing in shallow water in most lakes, there's a population of bass that are going to eat bluegill, brim, whatever you may call them. They're going to eat gills out there. So anything that is colored similar to a gill or green pumpkin really can be really, really good. You know, any lake that has threadfin shad or gizzard shad in them, you know, more than likely bass are going to feed on threadfin and gizzard shad in whatever lake. And so that really helps me with selecting, especially a fast moving lure color is going to be something shad or bait fish white in color. You know, there are pockets of the country where there are certain random bait fish that also prevail in those lakes. And so you should also know that. For example, if you live in Florida, we all know that like the golden shiner is one of the best bait fish that a lot of bass eat down in Florida. I mean, you think of all the guys that live bait fish down there, they're all using big golden shiners. So a lot of your golden baits can actually be really well because they mimic a golden shiner. If you go into the Carolinas, I mean, North Carolina, South Carolina, a blueback herring is one of the main bait fish on that lake. And so anything that is blueback herring-esque in color is going to work well. If you live up in the northern part of the country, there's actually a lot of different bait fish up here, I feel like, but you know, you have alewives, you have ciscos, you have perch. So really doing a quick Google search can really help you to kind of nail down what is in the lakes that you fish. And so, what the bait fish are that the bass eat in the lakes that you're fishing. Now, with all that being said, I think it's really important to just remember white, black and blue, and green pumpkin, right? Or maybe I should say instead of white is bait fish colored. Because those three colors, white, black and blue, and green pumpkin, will catch a bass across the country no matter where you go. Those 3 colors alone. So you can pick, of your 4 baits that you're gonna have, your fast, your slow, your finesse, your glide bait, they can all just be one of those colors. And so a lot of times with a fast moving lure, a lot of times I do go with kind of a bait fish color. I mean, like for example, a jerk bait, it's a bait fish color. And anything, there's a lot of different baits that can fall into a bait fish color. These are all kind of, this is just white. This is shad, sexy shad. This is table rock shad of some sort. But they're all, to me, bait fish colored. That will work anytime that you go out there. So don't always get crazy about trying to find the perfect color lure, because again, whoops, the important thing that we're trying to do is locate bass. And I think that a lot of anglers can actually change up their colors way too soon, and it can actually lead them down a bad path. I think that the best thing that we can do as an angler is fish our confidence baits, the 4 categories that I just talked about, in one of those basically 3 colors, and just fish until you get into areas where you know there's a lot of fish. Because as anglers, the more and more that you fish, you start to realize when you get into these areas that I always called have life. And when they have life, like you're seeing bait fish, you know, maybe you're seeing bass even bust. You're obviously starting to catch some fish, or sometimes you're just simply seeing fish. Maybe you're fishing that jerk bait like we talked about. You bring it to the boat and there's 2 fish right behind it. They didn't eat it, but now you're starting to see some life. And I think that it's really important to fish our confidence baits in just a few colors until we find those areas. Because if you change up baits too soon, you can actually go down a bad path. Well, you will end up fishing the wrong bait for that situation. For example, imagine that you are fishing, we'll say a lake that is kind of off color or muddier, and you're trying to locate bass. Now, maybe you start doing some flipping and pitching, because a lot of times in off-color, muddy water, you know, flipping and pitching can be a great technique. And so you start flipping and pitching, and you know, a lot of textbooks of bass fishing and YouTube channels and pro fishermen will tell you, hey, black and blue is the deal in off-color water, which it absolutely is. Like it's a bait that I'm not even gonna think twice. I'm gonna pick up black and blue. But if you are in your boat and you are trying to find that perfect color, maybe you decide, maybe you've gone down the bank and you flipped a lot of different laydowns that are in the water, and you happen to finally, like you're not getting bit, you finally decide, you know what, I'm gonna switch to green pumpkin. And so you switch to green pumpkin, and the first laydown that you come to, you flip in there, you catch a bass on that green pumpkin one. And you think, bam, I got it, it's green pumpkin. Well, what happens a lot of times is you keep on going down the bank. You go down to the bank for another hour flipping the green pumpkin one, and then nothing happens. But what tends to happen after that is all of a sudden you do find one of those areas. Maybe it's the back of the creek. Maybe you finally make your way to the back of the creek, and there is a population of bass in the back of the creek. And you flip through the back of the creek and you catch 2 fish on that green pumpkin flipping bait back there. And you're like, bam, green pumpkin is the absolute deal, guys. You're telling all your friends it's green pumpkin. You got to pick green pumpkin. But the thing is that because you switched baits up too soon and you caught that fish, even though it was kind of a random fluke fish, and then you caught those 2 fish in the back of the pocket on green pumpkin, you think you got it figured out. But what you really should do is start changing up colors when you get in those zones where you know a lot of bass are. So cognitively, you should think, I have found a zone where bass are. It's the back of the creek. And so what I would suggest doing is, before you leave that area, go back through with the black and blue. Because you might find that you might catch 4 times as many fish. Instead of catching 2, maybe you catch 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 bass on a black and blue, because typically black and blue silhouette's better in muddy water, which allows bass to see it a little bit better, even though they can't see a whole lot, but that's what the textbooks tell us. But black and blue might be the deal back there, but you think it's green pumpkin because you switch baits up too soon. And I know that this might sound a little bit confusing, but I think that anytime you are just going down the bank and you are trying to locate fish, just stick with very simple colors until you find fish. When you get in the zones where you know fish are, and we just talked about what those zones look like, that is when experimentation with colors, you can really start to nitpick. Sorry, a fly just flew in my face. You can really start to nitpick at colors then. And that's really what I suggest doing it, because you're going to see a very positive relationship with how many bites that you get in a very quick amount of time. And so once you start to see that correlation, then you can really fine tune exactly what the bass are, which can help you in catching bass in the rest of the lake. So that's something that I have always done. And I remember hearing Brian Thrift, and I don't even know in what context he said it, but I know in what context I heard it, was that he said that when he catches a fish, sometimes he puts his rod down that he caught that fish on because he wants to find what else he can catch a bass on. And it made sense to me, because I think a lot of anglers want to continue on with that bait, but if you have found an area where there's a lot of fish, sometimes it's really good to go through that area and just fish as many different baits as you can, because you're going to get that feedback very quickly from a bass. You're going to find if they want a chatterbait over a spinnerbait. If you're going to find if they want a square bill over a lipless crankbait, or whatever it may be, a green pumpkin jig versus a black and blue jig, or whatever. You're going to get some feedback very quickly in those areas that can then help you the rest of the lake. But if you switch up too soon, you may go down a bad path. You know, because like I said, kind of in the example that I was saying, a lot of anglers may have caught those two fish in the back of the pocket on a green pumpkin, and they might think, you know what? I should go to the next pocket and go through with my green pumpkin, whatever. And they go to the next pocket and they only catch another fish or two in that pocket. And then they're like, I found the pattern. And then they keep doing pockets and they're catching fish, but what they don't know is they could be catching 3 or 4 times as many fish with a different color, because now they're so close-minded to it's got to be green pumpkin in the back of the pocket that they're missing out on fish. And so that is kind of the biggest concept of today's video, is making sure that you don't switch up too much until you get in those zones where you know a lot of fish are. Now, if you are pond fishing out there, you know, you might not always have to find the zone, because a lot of pond fish can be dumb, and you can actually start switching up baits a lot quicker in ponds, because maybe there's just fish all over the pond. Sometimes you do find it, especially in bigger ponds, that there will be little sections, a little corner here, a little point here, where there is more fish. And when you get into those areas, that's when you start switching up baits. And so just be a little bit, just be cognitive, just think about that kind of stuff when you go out there. When you get bit, try to ask yourself, is this a fluke fish? Is this an area that I found? Is there life in this area? Now, the one thing that I want to talk about quickly is the swim bait deal. And I think that this is something that is very, very important. Like I said, I didn't throw a lot of glide baits for a number of years until probably about 5 years ago. Yeah, about 5 years ago. And I feel like every year I learn more and more about glide bait fishing. Every year I catch more and more fish on a glide bait. But the biggest thing that I have found about a glide bait is that it is a tool to locate fish more than it is a fish catcher. And what I mean by that is, sometimes you will be going down the bank. Again, let's take our example. You're going down the bank and you get into an area where you catch 1 or 2 fish. And so it's the back of that pocket like we talked about. Now, before you leave that area, one of the best things that you can do, pick up a glide bait and go through that area. Because you may not catch a bunch of fish on it, but you may realize just how many bass are in that area. Because you pick up that glide bait, you cast it back there, a lot of times fish may not always bite the glide, but they're going to follow it. And so what you may do is you may go through an area thinking there's just a couple of fish back there. You throw the glide behind yourself and realize there's a lot of fish back here. I did this just this year. I found an area where I could I caught a fish, and I thought maybe there was more fish in this area, but I fished around with the particular bait that I was catching fish on, and I didn't catch anything more. Before I left, I picked up a glide bait, I cast it out there, and literally 7 fish on one cast followed it back. And I was like, oh crap, like there's a lot of fish in this little area. And so that particular zone that I thought maybe only had 1 fish in and I caught it actually had a lot of fish. But my timing was a little off. I had come there like in the middle of the day. And so what ended up happening is we came back that evening, not that evening, the next day's evening, fishing a different bait, not a glide bait, and caught a limit in that spot. And so that was all because though of the glide bait. And that has happened to me on multiple occasions where I will find fish with the glide bait and come back and catch them later. So when you get into an area, this doesn't always, you could start with the glide bait too. Like I don't think that there's anything wrong about starting with the glide bait, unless sometimes when you are fishing offshore cover or structure, if you fish a glide bait first through that area, what you will do is you will pull fish away from that area. And so they may not end up biting your glide, but you pull them out. And sometimes the best time that you're going to catch those fish is when they are hugged on that piece of structure or cover, and you make a cast in there with usually a bottom bouncing type bait, or even like a crankbait or something like that. So that's why I don't always start with the big bait, because you can pull fish away from the cover that you could have caught with a different lure. So it's very, very important though to always keep a glide bait. Now, when it comes to colors of glide baits, like I said at the beginning of this video, I don't really care what it is because I'm not necessarily trying to always catch bass on this. I typically just go with whatever the main bait fish is on that lake. If it's bluegill, if it's shad, I'm going with something that's bluegill colored, shad colored, whatever. But I also don't really care. For example, this bait right here I picked up is a Clash 9, and it's colored like a brown trout. I think I have fished one like area in the country that actually had a decent population of brown trout in it. It had browns and rainbow trout in it, and it was down in Missouri. And I didn't have this bait at the time, but it doesn't really matter to me because I am not necessarily trying to catch fish on this bait. I just want to pull them away. I want to be able to see them once I fish through an area so that I can know how many fish are in that area, in that zone. And so the moral of the story, don't switch up baits until you find them. Once you find them, try to find that bait that they like. And then before you leave, try to find out how many fish are actually there with the big bait. So guys, I really believe that if you do that process, it will help you to locate schools of fish out there on the water. It will help you also to stay motivated out there on the water. So hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to check out that fin gear. Everything's 20% off, and I will see you guys tomorrow.